These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal, Television for Agricultural Business Decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett, and thank you very much for joining us today here on Market Journal. Welcome into the month of December. We're sure glad to be back in action after last week's Thanksgiving break. From Christmas tree farming to assessing the current conditions when it comes to the U.S. cattle herd, we've got a lot of material to cover as part of this week's episode. But let's begin here on this front. We want to let you know of a couple educational opportunities for ag producers who may be thinking of implementing drones onto their operation. Nebraska Extension hosting the second annual Drones in Ag Workshop, as well as a Part 107 remote pilot exam prep course at the International Wheat Center, which is located in Grant, Nebraska. First up, mark your calendars for December 17th. Nebraska Extension is hosting its second annual Drones in Agriculture Workshop. This event is an opportunity to learn how drones can improve resource management and efficiency on the farm. The workshop will cover important topics such as drone licensing, FAA regulations, and drone mapping software. You'll also learn about the equipment maintenance, flight safety checklists, and hear from Frenchman Valley Co-op about their drone spraying program. The next day, on December 18th, Nebraska Extension is hosting a Part 107 remote pilot exam prep course. This course is designed to help get your remote pilot certification to fly drones commercially. The certification process requires passing a 60-question aviation exam.
One of the things that's kind of interesting is I get a lot of questions from farmers that are like, well, I'm going to fly a drone on my farm, so why do I need a license? You know, I bought the drone myself, I'm flying it myself, and I'm flying it over my own crop. And the FAA actually considers drones aircraft, and they fall under aircraft rules. And the FAA considers farming commercial. And if you're flying a drone taking pictures of a crop, which will be sold, that's considered a commercial operation. So yes, so farmers, they need to have a license, whether they like it or not, to use a drone in their operations. So one of the requirements to get a drone license is to take an aeronautical knowledge exam. And so what this course does is prepare students to successfully pass that exam. And then, of course, once they pass the exam, then they can apply for their remote pilot license or drone license. So yeah, this test is kind of hard. There's a lot of aviation material on it, and so if you have no aviation background, it's going to seem pretty foreign. And so the idea of this course, it's an 8-hour course, and basically I prepare the students to pass that test and focus on the material that might be the toughest for them.
To recap, the Drones in Agriculture Workshop will be held Tuesday, December 17th at the Stumpf International Wheat Center in Grant, Nebraska. The event runs from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Mountain Time. Registration is $75 and includes lunch. For questions, contact Samantha Daniel. And don't forget about the Part 107 exam prep course on Wednesday, December 18th at the same location. This 8-hour course will help you prepare for the commercial drone pilot exam. Registration is $275 and includes study materials and lunch. If you're interested, be sure to register by December 16th. The link to register is on your screen now and will be included along with this story. Find that on the Market Journal homepage. Now, if you'd like to learn more about these upcoming events or other ones in the future, be sure you check out the latest publications over online at cropwatch.unl.edu. As we move along now, as of January of 2024, the U.S. beef herd was at 28.2 million cattle. During the latest peak of the cattle cycle back in 2019, the U.S. beef herd inventory reached 31.6 million cattle. That's a drop of 3.4 million cattle, or roughly 11% of the whole inventory in just 5 years. Now, will we see the U.S. beef industry rebuild to the same inventory that we saw back in 2019 anytime soon? According to a Nebraska Extension educator, the answer is not likely. Market Journal's Bill Dodd has this story.
Many factors will affect the size of the U.S. beef cow herd at the next peak. It should be considered that beef on dairy crosses will likely affect the cow herd expansion. While there are several reasons that we may not see the same inventory as 2019, it's still apparent that the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic are still playing out in the beef industry. However, by the time the pandemic had hit, many already thought it may be time to reduce the U.S. beef cow herd inventory.
Yes, so I believe 2020 was a year in which the industry looked to shrink because of the challenges of the pandemic, bringing down prices as cattle were ready to be processed and they could not move on account of bottlenecks at the packing plants because of the situations on health and so forth related to the pandemic. So that factor of that year contributed to slowing down production from that year on down. We were already facing perhaps the largest cow herd since the previous cycle, which would have been sometime in 2014, in that year. And so it was time to begin to shrink it, if you will, because we probably had overproduction of beef. We were reaching that point. So 2020 did not help in the fact that prices were depressed. Producers began to consider slowing down production in whatever way they could. Drought did not help, slowing down production a little further and forcing herd liquidation starting in 2022. There's questions out there about beef on dairy. I believe most of the individuals that are involved in this have recognized that the production of those cattle is already been absorbed by the system. Certainly, the crosses of beef on dairy cows have helped to add pounds to the mix, but the actual numbers have not increased dramatically from what we had when they were straight-bred Holsteins. And so what we see into the future is probably somewhere between 30 to 40% of the dairy cows in this country being bred to Angus or other beef breed sires that could then enhance both the quality and the amount of beef that is produced from that industry. But this has already been happening for about 5 to 10 years.
When it comes to understanding the cost of preparing for herd expansion, the heifer development program conducted at UNL's Haskell Agricultural Laboratory in Concord has been hard at work providing detailed analysis of the process of growing replacement heifers.
I believe that some of the efforts at Haskell Lab to understand the costs associated with raising replacement heifers for producers that want to expand the herd when the time comes for expansion, and we do not believe the fall of 2024 is quite that time yet, mainly because prices are doing what they're doing. In essence, they're too attractive for people to want to retain heifers, and we need a few other things changing, perhaps a greater forage supply, which we were doing good in 2024, but of course the drought later in the summer forced producers to rethink that. But I think what we're doing at the Haskell Lab at the moment is really helping a producer consider all of the costs involved in raising heifers, which our previous experience from the 2023-2024 production cycle indicated that this can be accomplished for a grand total of about $2,500 per pregnancy or pregnant heifer going into production. That is a good start, and that's a very competitive number. The question is whether that number can allow a producer to pay and amortize a heifer coming into a cow in the next 5 to 10 years of the next cycle. Or predictions are that is, and that what we're learning at the Haskell lab with the heifer replacement or heifer development program will help us guide producers on what factors they need to consider as they're trying to expand their herds.
When thinking of herd expansion, keeping a good rapport with your veterinarian will be essential. As we head into the winter months and the new year, the biggest factor cattle producers should be focused on is the health and well-being of their herd.
One of the challenges that the industry faces, and we're beginning to see, I guess, the weather turning cold. And so our assets, in this case, cattle assets, of course, are the things we must protect going forth. Anything we need to do to keep these cattle alive and progressing on a good path to be able to breed and get ready to become mothers of the next generation of cattle. Generally, we're challenged at birth and soon after with diarrhea and some other challenges. Later, as cattle progress or calves progress into weaning, that could be a respiratory challenge and later reproductive challenges. So I think producers need to consider what are the greatest health challenges to their system so that they can address that with their veterinarian way ahead of time and try to save as many calves, female calves in this particular case, as possible so that it might make a smoother transition, a less expensive transition as they select heifers for the next generation of cows.
All right, thank you very much for that information, Bill. Now, if you'd like to get some additional insights like this, we encourage you to bookmark the website beef.unl.edu. On the topic of cattle, it's now time to check in on the markets, and this week joining us is Kyle Bumsted. He's a livestock analyst talking all things cattle. Here's our conversation from Thursday morning. Kyle, good to see you. Let's start with some of the news of the week, and that has to do with live cattle imports from Mexico due to the detection of New World screwworm. What can you tell us on this front, and how's that impacting the live cattle trade?
Well, first off, when we saw the headline drop, obviously the cattle market rallied, feeder cattle market rallied as well too, but about the same time the cash market took off. So most of the headlines, the stories, the emails, the releases that I've seen from that, they're hoping to, or they're going to be trying to get that open back up for us to be importing Mexican cattle here sometime in the next month. I think it's probably going to happen a little faster than that, but that was kind of that's what they're there for. I mean, they're there for that kind of stuff. I mean, they protected it and they stopped them coming in. The market took off as a result of it, but they're going to open that border back up, and eventually we're going to be taking in Mexican imports again.
Okay, glad to get your perspective on that matter. Kyle, there's a lot of fundamental things out there impacting the trade right now. Don't need to tell you that news, but some erratic price movements too. As we sit here, middle of December, nearing the end of 2024, what are maybe two or three of the biggest things that cattle producers need to be watching?
I think we're going to need to be watching the slaughter pace here. I mean, midweek we had a big plant go down here in central Nebraska, but to round it out, I think the packers are going to probably be trying to go down to a 36-hour week. And we've obviously got the holidays coming up here, so that's going to be slowing things down as far as production and processing anyway. But going down to a 36-hour week, that could cut our slaughter pace down to around 5.25 to 5.55, somewhere down in there. And that could back up a few cattle here, just to back up some cattle. And if they do that, that's going to give them just a little bit of bargaining power. So on the technical side of things here, money flow side of things here, I want to remind our producers out there that the fund money, the non-commercials, the algos, whatever you want to call them, algo funds, whatever, they're holding a huge net long in this cattle and feeder cattle complex. And for no reason, they could take their ball and go home. They could start cashing some money out here. It's the end of the year. It's the end of the month. It's the end of the quarter financially. And we could definitely see some volatile swings here in this cattle complex. Now, when we started out the week, we had a big down day, and then Tuesday we had a nice recovery, and then Wednesday a big down day, and Thursday kind of got off on a muted foot as well. And it's going to be very interesting how we settle out this week here. What do the weekly charts look like here once we wrap up?
Kyle, you bring up that point about the funds. Is there any indication they would want to get out of their positions going into the new year?
Other than the fact that they've got a lot of money made in them, not right now, but I'm not a fund manager. But if they get to a certain goal, they will pull the plug here and they will take some money off the table, because who's going to be left to buy it up here if they're holding a huge long position? who's going to be left to buy it? The small traders are going to come in here and buy it, and usually when that starts to happen, that's when things go the other way. So definitely watching for that kind of activity here. Also watching here this week in particular, we have December live cattle options. Those are going to expire here on Friday at the end of the week, and it seems like that 188 to 190 is kind of an area that they're trying to ping for option expiration. But even bigger number I'm watching is in the February live cattle contract here. 189 to 189.5 seems like we can't quite get through that. And if we do see these slaughter reduction and slaughter pace go down, we do see the cash market back up. We could see cash back up to, maybe back down to 185, and that could push this board down to, 180 somewhere in there. I'm not that bearish, but it could certainly happen just on money flow.
Kyle, I want to talk about the price of calves. Seen several pictures over the past couple of weeks on Twitter. People cannot believe the price that feedlots are having to pay for calves to feed them out here. And to that point, what does profitability look like right now for a feedlot owner?
Well, I could, off the top of my head, I know half dozen, maybe 10 yards that are kind of slowed down their buying just for the simple fact that they're way too high and they don't pencil out there in those deferred contracts. So what those yards have done is they switched to feeding cows, and I think after the first of the year, you're going to see a lot of cows hit the kill, and you're going to see the ground beef market maybe tank on this thing. There's going to be a slug of ground beef hit the market as far as grinds go. So they don't really pencil, and more power to them. A lot of folks are betting on the come right now, especially these light calves. I mean, 4-weight calves, $1,700. That's a pretty good ticket. And I know interest has come down, but I know a lot of producers' interest is still about the same. It hasn't come down that much, and interest is a big expense. And I'm also watching this grain complex too. Like when you look at that March-May the May-July timeframe there, that market is very, very tight. There's not a lot of carry out there. So it says we've got some pretty good intermediate and potentially long-term demand in this corn market. And you start putting a little bit of money on this corn market, that could make this thing hurt. It could make it hurt quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Glad you brought up the grain complex. I was going to get a couple questions about that, but I'll skip those and instead ask you, seasonally speaking, sounds like you're issuing some warnings about what could be ahead here in 2025. And I guess to that point, seasonally, January is not usually a great month for cattle, is it?
Not historically, but the time frame between Thanksgiving and New Year's is typically not a good time frame for the cattle anyway. You've got a seasonal bias where the cattle like to go down. So I am cautious about that as well too. And you couple that with the fund length and the way the charts have been acting here this week in particular. Granted, during this recording we're not closed for the week, so anything is bound to happen. There's a lot of week left in a couple of sessions, but that does kind of fit the bias. It is a little bit tough sometimes. The feeder cattle market generally is on a rocky slope here in the month of December because we simply don't have the cattle going into the index. Now, once you get to January, I've seen it both ways. I've seen January take off and rally, and I've seen January just tank because everybody's getting rid of feeders too. But I don't know if that's going to be the case right after the first of the year here. It's all going to kind of depend on what happens here with the cash market here. And as long as these these deferred live cattle contracts, if they could gain some ground and keep rallying on the deferred fats, then these front month feeders are probably going to be okay. But if we start losing traction in those deferred live cattle contracts, this thing could get real interesting real quick.
Always good to get Kyle's take of what's impacting the livestock sector. Coming up next week, we'll be back talking about the grains. And joining us is Doug Simon from Trados. We'll have a special edition of Market Journal from the Nebraska Ag Expo. Hope you'll tune in then. Keep those home fires burning this time of the year and perhaps turn your woodlot or grove into another income stream on the farm. With the expanding market for firewood, you may have a marketable opportunity growing on your farm that could be harvested and sold into the firewood market. But this takes planning, assessment of those resources, and an understanding of the market and value of the trees. You can learn about the potential that might be growing in your backyard in the latest issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It's now time to check in on weather with Market Journal's Chief Meteorologist Eric Hunt. Eric, it's December and the new year is closing in. Old Man Winter seems to be knocking right now on the door of most Nebraskans. How are things shaping up as we turn to the week ahead?
Thanks, Bryce. Old Man Winter's going to take a little bit of vacation this weekend. As we're going to see temperatures well into the 50s for most of us across the state, probably getting closer to 60 if you live near the Kansas border. This will be a welcome treat, particularly for those of us in northeastern Nebraska, where it's been fairly cold in the last 7 to 10 days. This will be a relatively short-lived break from the colder temperatures, though, as we're going to see a trough moving from Canada into the central U.S. At the surface, there'll be a decent cold front moving through the state on Sunday night into Monday morning. That'll bring much colder temperatures for all of us. And the best chance of precipitation, though, is going to be well to our south and east where the best moisture dynamics are. So if you're hoping for precipitation next 7 days, not looking particularly good for prospects this week. Might see a couple sprinkles or snow flurries across portions of north central Nebraska with a frontal passage on Sunday night and Monday morning. But most of this will remain dry in the next 7 days. Probably going to remain dry for at least another 10 days as well. In terms of temperatures, we're probably going to be our coldest on Wednesday, with temperatures likely being only around the upper 20s for highs across portions of north central and northeastern Nebraska on Wednesday. A little bit warmer as we head toward the south and toward the west, but still relatively chilly for this time of year for most of us. But that'll also be relatively short-lived, as by this next weekend we'll be having ridging overhead for most of the north central United States, and our temperatures will be well above average again, probably looking at temperatures being close to 50 degrees for a good portion of us by next Saturday. Maybe only getting the upper 40s across portions of north central, northeastern Nebraska, but still, for mid-December, that's not too bad. This also looks to continue as we head toward the week before Christmas, with temperatures being expected to be well above average across most of the northern United States. That'll keep the Grinch happy, but probably not the snow enthusiasts happy, who are maybe hoping to get some snowfall before Christmas. In terms of precipitation, right now the CPC is not really showing a strong signal one way or the other for precipitation. The models are hinting at some precipitation maybe moving into the region as we head toward December 17th and 18th, but realistically that's probably our next best chance of any moisture, and there hasn't been a consistent signal for bringing significant precipitation in, though it is a possibility. Worth watching. In terms of precipitation, we've only really just seen a little bit of snowfall across northeastern Nebraska here in the last week or so. We did have a good bit of wind, though, particularly on Wednesday, across the north central northeastern portion of the state, where we did have wind gusts well over 40 miles an hour. Some places had over 50-mile wind gusts on Wednesday afternoon. Lighter winds out toward the west, where it was also a little bit warmer. In terms of drought monitor, we didn't see any change here in the last week, so we still have a little under half the state in severe drought. About 84% of the state is in some form of drought. Only portions of southwestern Nebraska are free and clear of everything. Soil moisture, again, this is a lot better than it was about 6 weeks ago, but we still have plenty of capacity for moisture. If we can get another really good rain before the soils freeze, that would be very beneficial, particularly for western Nebraska, where we still have soil moisture percentiles that are quite low for this time of year. So water equivalent in the northern Rockies is definitely below average. This isn't necessarily a dire situation, but we are definitely under average some of our main water sources. And soil temperatures right now are mostly in the 30s statewide. A couple of places have seen soil temperatures at 4 inches drop a little bit below freezing for the first time this fall and early winter. And temperatures, we did actually go below zero for the first time this season in Cherry County. Thanks, back to you, Bryce.
All right, thanks, Eric. Certainly beginning to feel a lot like winter out there, and it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas as people are putting up their holiday decor over the past couple of weeks, with Christmas right around the corner. This week we had the chance to just drive north of Lincoln to visit a real Christmas tree farm. We were joined by the president of the Nebraska Christmas Tree Growers Association, that is Dennis Adams.
Well, Dennis, thanks so much for having us out here. Tell me the history of your Christmas tree farm.
Well, the name of our tree farm is Walnut Grove Tree Farm, and it has a little history behind it because it actually was called Walnut Grove Lodge when we bought the place, and also you can see all the walnut trees around here, so we retained the name Walnut Grove Tree Farm. And we bought the farm in late 1982 with the idea of planting Christmas trees, and planted the first Christmas trees in the spring of 1983. And sold the first Christmas trees in 1990. So this is our 35th year of selling Christmas trees.
What kind of trees are you growing here just north of Lincoln?
Well, basically we have three main varieties three main species that we plant. Scotch pine, white pine, and fir. We do have a few spruce, we do have a few Austrian pine, and that's about it.
Let's talk about consumers. When people come to your farm, perhaps for the first time, what are they looking for in a tree?
Well, everybody, kind of beauty, I found out over the years that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I'm surprised sometimes what type of trees people pick. But usually people have in mind what they want. If they come and want a Scotch pine, we've got that. A lot of people anymore, over the last 10 years, the trend has been more towards the fir trees. So I think most of the growers in eastern Nebraska are trying to grow more fir trees for that market. And then white pine is one of my favorite trees, soft-needled white pine, and a lot of people like the white pine.
Fir is a tough tree to grow, especially in eastern Nebraska.
Yes, it is.
Especially over the last few years with drought. How have you tried to overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I found out just from experience that fir trees in eastern Nebraska or Nebraska anywhere are very difficult to grow because of our hot, dry summers, and we get into periods of drought where we may not have rain. Well, like this year, we didn't have rain for about 2 months. And I found out if we don't get rain with firs in about 2 weeks, they start dying. So a few years ago, I took the jump and invested in some drip irrigation system, kind of a rudimentary one, but some drip irrigation system. And so all of my first and second year fir trees are under drip irrigation, and a few of the white pine, but mostly just the fir. If I wouldn't have had drip irrigation this year, I would have lost 100% of the fir seedlings.
In general, over the years you've been growing trees, consumer demand still there, at least for the choose and cut farms?
I think for the choose and cut farms in Nebraska, I think I've seen the demand. Seems like people are getting back more to the families going out as kind of a tradition and picking a real tree rather than an artificial tree. And that's kind of who we cater to. We kind of cater to families. All the choose and cut growers in Nebraska kind of cater to families. So I think the demand has been up a little bit the last few years.
Well, you're the president of the Nebraska Christmas Tree Growers Association. Talk about the industry in Nebraska. Obviously very niche, but how many growers are truly out there today?
Yeah, the Christmas tree industry in Nebraska compared to other states like Michigan or something obviously is relatively small. And all the growers in Nebraska are choose and cut growers. There's no wholesale growers in Nebraska. I think the Christmas tree growers, if I remember right, the association started in like the mid-60s. So, you know, it's pretty old. I mean, there's been kind of a trend downward in the number of Christmas tree farms in the state. So when I was first in the Christmas Tree Growers Association, there were around over 70 tree farms in the association. And now I think we have less than 20 farms that are in the association. So it's declined. One of the reasons the demand on the existing farms is so much is because there's not as many farms around as there was.
Fun to learn about a niche business opportunity here in the state of Nebraska. If you'd like to learn more about real Christmas tree farms, there are several of them, as Dennis mentioned, across Nebraska. The Nebraska Department of Agriculture has a real Christmas tree farm directory. You can visit their website right now and get a link to that website. Well, that is about all the time we have for this week's show. If you did miss one of our stories, I want to encourage you to follow Market Journal on YouTube and on social media, where we invite you to join in on the conversation. Hope to see you right here back next time, as we'll be at the Nebraska Ag Expo. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.